Hi there, I'm Jim Zirin. Welcome back for more conversations. With us is Joe Walston, an amazing naturalist from the Wildlife Conservation Society. I first met Joe in 2006 when he was the WCS station chief in Cambodia. He introduced me to the ecological wonders of the Tonle Sap, a 75-mile-long river that reverses its course annually. The Tonle Sap is the world's only naturally reversing river on a regular seasonal basis, and the experience was thrilling. Many environmentalists are now in a state of despair. They fear the ecology is in inevitable decline, and we are losing out to population growth and economic development that leads to natural resource extraction. They bewail the impact of climate change. They point to disturbingly violent weather patterns or air pollution in Beijing, Delhi, and Jakarta. They find our oceans rising to unacceptable heights with the melting of the polar ice cap and the virtual extinction of certain iconic animals. They lament that somehow we can't do anything about it. Joe Walston is convinced that they're wrong. He is optimistic about the future of the planet, and he will tell us why. I'm pleased to welcome Joe Walston to this table. Now, Joe, I'm delighted to have you with us, and perhaps you could just give us a brief sketch of your background and how you came to love the wild and how you became committed to doing the marvelous work you do.
Thank you, Jim. I'm no different from many people, except as a kid I loved wildlife. The only difference is I never really grew out of that, and so I ended up studying something else at university, and then I saw other people studying zoology and animals and decided I wanted to do that. And so I've ever since been working in the developing world, predominantly Southeast Asia and Africa, and living and working in these areas to develop conservation programs. And for the last 16, 17 years, I've been working for the Wildlife Conservation Society, and I'm now a resident of New York.
Now, you spent 15 years with WCS in Indochina, mostly Cambodia, I think, and Vietnam, and now you live in New York. I think you've been here since 2010. What led you to make this transition?
Well, I spent most of my, as you said, most of my working life has been in countries going through in their development stage. So mainly Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, as you said, and then in Africa and Gabon, and then Zambia. I've come to New York the last few years, initially to run WCS's Asia program. And now I run our global programs. So our headquarters is here at the Bronx Zoo, and WCS has a long history of international and national conservation efforts based out of the zoos and aquarium here in New York. I have the best office in the world. I think to be able to drive in New York and go every day into the Bronx Zoo, which is a wonderful place, and be able to actually connect what happens in the zoo to what happens globally to conservation is a very lucky opportunity.
Now tell us about the global conservation movement. How long has it existed, and what is it seeking to achieve?
So global conservation is a very new discipline, as you suggest. It's only been around about 100 years, and initially started really through people visiting areas and hunters, especially in areas that were concerned about the declines in populations, and groups like the WCS, initially the New York Zoological Society as we were called, used to send out researchers who eventually became not just interested in studying animals but concerned about their future.
Part of your focus is preserving what you call iconic animals: tigers, elephants, rhinos, perhaps there are others, and which become endangered. First of all, why is it necessary to have these iconic animals around? Can't the Earth do well without them?
It's not quite clear actually they can do that well without them. Iconic species at the top of many of these chains, once they're removed, they cause sometimes catastrophic disruptions and declines in other species beneath them, and that can also have knock-on effects we've seen in many parts of the world when you remove those. But iconic species also are iconic of nature, and I think for human beings to be able to have such power, such authority, such over our planet, and yet allow these iconic species to go to extinction. I think that says something very profound about humanity itself. And so I think at a very basic level, these iconic species not only represent for us our efforts on nature, but I think they're also the greatest draw to get people to care about nature. I think all of us as kids, whether it be the bison in the US or tigers or elephants around the world, they really are the first species which grab our attention and draw us in. And if we can maintain that and keep people's focus on those species, because they're our hooks, then we can get people to start caring about the rest of the species and the rest of the planet.
Well, particularly man has endangered the tiger. Hunters like tigers for their libraries on the wall, stuffed, and elephants, which provide ivory for the ivory trade, have been the target of hunters for many years. Are you doing anything to try to limit the ability to hunt these animals?
Absolutely, and that's for all these species. Essentially, there's kind of a three-pronged approach, which is stop the killing, stop the trade, and stop the demand. And those three things have to happen in conjunction. One can't do one and assume everything's going to be sorted. So we've got to protect these species on the ground in the places where they live naturally. So the tiger is a great example of a species that's gone under incredible decline, over 95% decline of the species the last 100 years. And yet now we're starting to see, because we've protected some core areas, we've allowed them to become secure, and they're starting to recover now. Stopping the trade, we know the illegal wildlife trade is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It is combined with many other forms of illegal trade, and it's driving the declines of species, both here and abroad. And we've really got to be able to tackle that, both at the governmental level and with trade agreements like CITES that deal specifically with wildlife and plant species, but also to be able to increasingly support countries to tackle their own internal trade. And then the third one is to reduce demand.
Yes, what is CITES all about?
CITES is a convention on the international trade of endangered species, and it's a worldwide convention between the governments of the world to be able to agree on legal trade, i.e. what is acceptable to be able to trade, which species, how much, and also what is is highly regulated and controlled, so limited trade for some species with permits, and then what's absolutely illegal to be able to be traded.
Now, essential to our ecology and indeed to our aesthetic appreciation of nature is the tropical rainforest. Are they also endangered as the animals are?
Yes, tropical rainforests are one of the most threatened systems on our planet at this stage.
Why?
Because, for a number of reasons. One, because they, in many ways, they're just sitting amounts of cash. One of those large trees sitting in the tropical rainforests is worth an awful lot of money. And in many ways, we still consider today natural resources as free. We often, and this is one of the big challenges we face, is that if it's there and it can be taken and to no cost of anyone. And so they have a lot of innate value. Secondly, once they're cleared, they can be converted into agriculture and room and space for agriculture. And so there's great demand to be able to clear tropical rainforests. And thirdly, also, it produces a number of products, so of value as well. And in an ideal world, we'd harvest those sustainably, but in many cases there's a drive to extract, and there's not sufficient management of those areas to be able to put in place long-term solutions.
So what are you doing to protect the tropical rainforest?
So a number of things. Protected areas, again, are at the heart of any solution to this, but they're not sufficient in of themselves. So there's a lot of indigenous communities that have lived in the large areas, especially in places like the Amazon basin, but other areas as well, Congo basin. So increasing their rights to be able to manage and control their land and prevent them from being logged, but also providing incentives. So well-managed forest areas as well can be used for commercial reasons. without having to necessarily destroy them.
Are you trying to protect coral reefs as well?
Yeah, it used to be the big threat to coral reefs was indeed extraction and those kind of issues, but the overriding issue now for coral reefs is global climate change and the warming of the sea waters, the acidification that is going on, and ultimately the bleaching, which is this effect which is destroying huge numbers of reefs at the moment. But New York, we're sitting in New York, and there's an incredibly exciting new initiative coming out at the moment of a number of different partners and supported by groups that are identifying the most resilient reefs around the world. And identifying those reefs that have the greatest chance of both being resilient to climate change and this bleaching effect, and therefore being able to be the precursors of a recovery once we get to grips with climate change, once we control, and once we find out better ways of being able to help with adaptation. These are the reefs around the world that are going to be able to spawn new reefs and start the recovery of conservation of reefs.
But suppose we lose all our coral reefs. Does that mean life will not be sustainable, human life on this planet?
They'll be part of the picture of what is, they'll be part of that challenge to humanity of how one copes with a natural world which is no longer providing the services and protection that and the benefits that we require and rely on. So we still massively underestimate the impacts that climate change is going to happen, is going to have on the places where we live. I mean, we sit here in New York, we're on the shore. We've been the recipient of a number of different recent impacts and effects which are only going to get less reliable in our predictability, more harmful to the people who live around these areas. But also we are seeing this. I spend a lot of time traveling the world, seeing places which not only are going to be hit, but absolutely are hit. I've stood on islands off Papua New Guinea where the indigenous communities are literally bombing the reefs to be able to take out the coral and put it on their beaches because they can think of no better way at the moment. They're not armed in any way at the moment to be able to cope with what they're seeing of the increased sea level rises and the encroachment that is having on their limited lands.
You've also recently written a paper for Bioscience where you see light at the end of the tunnel. And you say you're optimistic. Perhaps you could elaborate a little on what your argument was in your paper and why you remain an optimist.
Sure, and this is the real crux of it, which is at the time when we're seeing nature go through its darkest moments, when we're seeing declines all about, it's very difficult to be able to think about anything else apart from just slowing declines. And that, in many ways, has been the effort and the focus of global conservation since its inception about 100 years ago.
Slowing declines.
Slowing declines, and that's a miserable existence. And that's an industry that really is. No wonder people do. Sometimes wonder what is the future if all our work is the slowing of the declines or the holding back of the inevitable rising tide. And I think for much of conservation we're absorbed by that, and that's our narrative. That's how we talk about it. And it's absolutely true that we are still obviously going through declines and worrying trends. But what we're also missing here is the great drivers of the world. We never actually think about what the world we want to look like in order that nature can recover. What does the world have to look like in order that we can start to plan for not only a stabilization of nature, but a recovery of nature?
Okay, so pause for a moment. In your marvelous Bioscience piece, you quote Churchill, 1940, one of the darkest hours in England's history, and he said, "In casting up this dread balance sheet, contemplating our dangers with a disillusioned eye, I see great reason for intense vigilance and exertion, but none whatever for panic or despair." Does that sum up your attitude toward the future of
that really does.
environment?
That was a quote picked by Eric Sanderson, the lead author in this work, and my collaborator at WCS. And really,
why is that relevant?
Because at its darkest, at anyone's darkest hour, whether it be the Blitz in London in World War II, or whether it be the environment globally, it's not only very hard to be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel and just hold on with your fingernails, but it's also the most important time to be doing exactly that. Because if you don't, and if one is only obsessed about getting through the next day, then one misses the big opportunities. And we have immense opportunities presented to us at the moment.
Well, tell us what the opportunities are. What do you see as the good things that are going to happen over the next 100 years?
So if I asked people again that question, what would you want the world to look like in order that we can recover? Many of us are going to say the same thing. We've got to have some sort of stabilization of the human population. We can't envisage really a real recovery of nature or even stabilization of nature if just the population just keeps on going up.
Well, when I was born, I remember my father saying, some time after I was born even, that there were 2 billion people in the world. Now there are, what, 6 to 7 billion in the world?
Yeah, and larger than that.
And it's growing.
And it's growing.
And the more people, the greater the burden on the environment, isn't that right?
That is right. I mean, at a basic level, that's absolutely right. But there are other bigger factors as well involved in just the number of people. So, for instance, we have, up until recently, perversely relied on a large number of people of being extremely poor. And that has been the description of the world. Up until very recently, most of the world was extremely poor, thereby by consuming very little natural resources. And the fact though now is that increasingly vast numbers of people, large numbers of people than ever in the history of the planet, are now moving out of extreme poverty. And
but isn't that a negative factor from the point of view of the environment? And
that is the time when the greatest conversion of natural capital to economic capital is. When you give someone who's living in poverty $1, most of that dollar will be spent on natural resources, i.e. food, as they come out. And as they move out of poverty, an awful lot of that is spent on increased natural resources.
Okay, so we want to move people out of poverty. That should be one of our humanitarian goals and moral goals.
Absolutely. So absolutely, there's a moral imperative for that to happen. What we're missing also, there's a conservation imperative to happen. And most people still are of the mindset, and they're not wrong, that of course, but hold on, as people move out, they're going to consume more, that's going to be worse for nature. That is in the short term, but in the long term, that gets us to where we want to be.
Okay, so we want to reduce the rate of population growth. You see that as happening. We want to move people out of poverty. You see that as happening, and maybe a negative short-term result, but a positive long-term result. What else do you see happening over the next 100 years that's going to have a favorable impact?
Well, the big trend, of course, is urbanization. And this is often been seen as an effect of wealth creation in many ways. But actually, not only is it a driver, but what happens in the process of urbanization is not only fascinating and completely new to me as I started really working on this with Eric and others. And
so is this why you moved from the Tonle Sap to the Bronx Zoo?
I have to say it was not for such noble reasons as that, but it's certainly coming. I've only ever lived in countries going through transition and in these areas, and predominantly developing countries. It's my first time ever living in a real city is in New York.
So what's so great about urbanization? I mean, urban areas are overcrowded, they're filthy, people waste environmental resources, water, and
so actually, this is
we overeat, we do everything wrong from the point of view of the environment.
A great misconception actually about cities. Cities are actually a lot greener, and at the same wealth level, a person in a city is going to have a much lower environmental impact than someone at the same wealth level in the rural areas. So first off, urban areas, they do consistently wonderful things happen within urban areas. We often look at an urban area and we look at it dirty or sprawling or even very densely populated, and then we look at these bucolic scenes in rural areas and look how wonderful. But actually, you look at the statistics, you look at the evidence, the data, and they all point in a very different direction. You do not want to be poor in the countryside. If anyone in the country who is poor in the environment, often, unless you're in very, very solid indigenous communities with stable systems, you really want to be, as many people do around the world, they head for the city. They head for the city not only because there are genuine opportunities, but also because it's a progenitor of a lot of social change. People have greater access. People have access to things like education, basic.
Fewer children.
And that leads, especially with women who get greater traction over their own lives and influence over their own lives, the fertility rate goes down as urbanization progresses, because as first of all, mortality rates go down. So you can invest more in fewer children. The payoffs are much greater, i.e. if education starts to have more direct benefits to the future and likelihood of progression of your child. And so what happens is that women have greater authority over their own lives. They choose both because they have lower mortality rates, but also because they see the benefits of investing more in education in those areas. So you have much lower fertility rates. A hugely exciting thing just happened yesterday, which has almost gone totally unnoticed, which is, I don't know if you remember, but only about 10 years ago, the Chinese government stopped the one-child policy, or started phasing out the one-child policy. In many cases, when that first started, everyone was up in arms, and my goodness, the population level is just going to boom. The other day, the Chinese government has recognized that the population of China is going to peak in 2029.
2029?
2029. The actual population, it's been slowing the decline of the rate of increase in the population in China has been going down for years.
So how are they going to do that?
It's been naturally. This is the wonder. This is the great wonder of all this. This is the
So there's a
commonality.
natural trend toward smaller families and declines in rate of population increase.
The world is massively urbanizing. Already Latin America is almost over 85% urbanized. Africa is starting to urbanize as well. Asia is heavily urbanized.
Let's look at sub-Saharan Africa. And I mean, it's nice to talk about education of women as we sit here in New York, but in sub-Saharan Africa, women are not being educated. And I saw one paper that argued that if in over 100 years, you could reduce the population by 1 billion if you educated women, I guess particularly in family planning and birth control.
Well, this is the great. I mean, first of all, that's absolutely. It's a fantastic fact. I mean, we worked a lot. We took a lot of work from great demographers that are operating today. Some really interesting stuff that conservationists and those in the environment sector are rarely aware of. And for us to understand, as has been published, that really the education of sub-Saharan African girls is so important, not only again on a moral basis, but actually the effect that's going to have on sub-Saharan Africa, which is the last region of the world to be going through this major demographic shift. And its population is going to increase dramatically. But if we manage to successfully support women and the education of girls, it's going to profoundly affect by up to 1 billion people the total population of the world.
Okay, so to sum up, the various pillars of your argument are a reduction in the rate of population increase, move to the cities, urbanization, education of women, leading people out of poverty, and anything else that's going to help solve this problem? Well,
it's the actually urbanization process itself which is driving a lot of these things. You know, when in China, when you look at the big effects that has happened, that has driven a lot of these changes in China. Many of them can, come back to the authority that Deng Xiaoping and afterwards gave the people ability to actually move. Most governments around the world at many stages didn't allow people to move around, or at least they didn't have the ability either to choose or the facility to be able to move. Once people do, what we're seeing around the world is people urbanize. And through urbanization, we're seeing a reduction of the fertility rate, we're seeing a shift out of poverty, and we're getting to a phase within probably my children's lifetime, we're going to see a world's population that is going to finally stabilize. Most people out of extreme poverty, most people urbanized and educated. And that is the conditions of life. That is the state of the world that we want.
And a healthier environment and a healthier humanity.
A healthier humanity. Now that's going to come at a huge cost of nature. There is no question that we are going to continue on this decline that we're seeing at the moment. So our goal is very clear. When in the UK, we lost most of our nature coming through our bottleneck process, our development bottleneck process, and we lost most of our nature. That's why we love garden birds and badgers. The US went through its own transition more rapidly and had a larger rate and got more of its nature through its own developmental process. So now, although we've got issues in the US about the environment, we have these vast, wonderful landscapes. They're reconnecting now because people created places like the national park system and others. They put in places, and now they're reconnecting and regrowing. And what I see now in places like the Rockies, sure there are issues, sure there are problems, and there are threats coming as well. But if you had shown today, back to the people who established Yellowstone National Park, what is happening now, they would cry in actual happiness. Because they thought it was the end of the West.
Okay, but unfortunately we have to wrap up. This has been fascinating. But I have a question for you, Joe Walston. Are we going to be able to save our planet?
That is a big key. Whatever we do now will decide whether species like the tiger and gorilla become the passenger pigeons and head off to extinction, or they become the bison, where at their darkest hour we stepped in, we saved them, and now they're recovering across North America.
So hail the buffalo bison.
Absolutely.
Joe Walston, this has been marvelous.
Thanks
Thank you so much for coming by. And thank you for coming by. Tune in next week for more conversations. I'm Jim Zirin. Take care and all the best.